She said we should keep things simple and not complicate our bond. The words hit me like a wrench dropped into perfectly calibrated machinery, disrupting everything I thought I understood about us. I had spent 2 years building what felt like the foundation of something real with Bella through our Tuesday board game nights and weekend hiking adventures around Phoenix, sharing everything from career frustrations to childhood dreams during those long conversations that stretched past midnight at her cozy apartment overlooking the desert. I was a water systems engineer who approached most problems methodically, analyzing flow rates and pressure differentials with the same precision I applied to everything else in my life. But with Bella I found myself genuinely excited about someone else's perspectives on life, her infectious laugh becoming the highlight of my carefully structured weeks. She had this way of listening that made even my most mundane work stories about municipal water treatment plants sound fascinating, asking thoughtful questions about sustainable infrastructure that showed she actually cared about my passions. That evening at her place, surrounded by the familiar chaos of Scrabble tiles scattered across her coffee table and our empty mugs from the French press coffee she always made perfectly, I finally worked up the courage to tell her how I felt, explaining that our friendship had grown into something deeper for me and wondering if she might feel the same way about the connection we had built together. I had rehearsed this moment dozens of times during my commute, imagining various scenarios and responses, but nothing had prepared me for the gentle finality in her voice when she responded. She listened with the same thoughtful attention she always gave my detailed explanations of hydraulic engineering challenges, nodding slowly before gently but decisively explaining that she valued what we had too much to risk destroying it with romantic complications, citing too many close friendships she had watched crumble after someone developed feelings and changed the entire dynamic between friends who had been perfectly compatible as companions. I accepted her decision with what I hoped was dignified grace, assuring her that our friendship mattered more than my romantic hopes and that I understood her perspective completely, but inside I felt like my entire emotional infrastructure had just been condemned as structurally unsound. The drive home felt longer than usual, every familiar landmark reminding me of conversations we had shared about future plans and dreams that suddenly seemed naive in retrospect. That night, lying in bed staring at the textured ceiling of my apartment and listening to the distant hum of the central air conditioning, I realized with engineering-level clarity that staying close would only prolong the ache of wanting something she could never give me, like trying to force water uphill without adequate pressure. I opened my laptop and started researching water systems positions in cities far enough away to help me rebuild my life around something other than unrequited feelings, scrolling through job postings with the same methodical approach I used for project planning. Portland kept appearing in my searches, with opportunities in renewable energy infrastructure that aligned perfectly with my expertise in sustainable water systems and my growing interest in environmental engineering, offering both significant professional growth and the geographic distance I desperately needed to heal properly without constant reminders of what I had lost. I began the careful process of extracting myself from our friend group over the following weeks, applying the same systematic approach I used for complex engineering projects. Tuesday game nights became impossible due to sudden overtime requirements at the water treatment facility, and Saturday hiking trips conflicted with fictional continuing education seminars that I claimed were mandatory for maintaining my professional certifications. I felt terrible lying to people who genuinely cared about me, but I knew that explaining the real reason would only create awkward dynamics and force everyone to choose sides in a situation where no one had actually done anything wrong. The application process for the senior water systems position with EcoFlow Solutions in Portland became my secret obsession, crafting cover letters that highlighted my expertise in sustainable infrastructure and my passion for renewable energy integration in municipal water systems. I spent evenings researching their hydroelectric projects across the Pacific Northwest, genuinely excited about the possibility of working on cutting-edge environmental technology while simultaneously knowing this opportunity represented my escape route from emotional complications I could no longer handle. When I finally submitted my application, emphasizing how my background in desert water conservation could bring valuable perspectives to their expanding Pacific Northwest operations, I felt like I was casting my future into unknown territory with nothing but professional competence and determination to guide me. 3 weeks later, the phone interview went better than I had dared hope, with their lead engineer expressing genuine enthusiasm about my ideas for integrating sustainable practices into existing municipal water infrastructure. I scheduled the in-person interview for the following month, booking a long weekend trip to Portland that I disguised as a vacation to explore potential relocation options for career advancement. The announcement dinner with our friend group was harder than I had anticipated, watching Bella's face carefully as I explained my decision to pursue this incredible opportunity with a renewable energy company that perfectly matched my long-term career goals. She asked pointed questions about the timing and whether this sudden interest in Pacific Northwest opportunities had anything to do with our recent conversation, but I maintained that this was purely about professional development and my growing passion for environmental engineering applications. Marcus congratulated me enthusiastically while our friend Sarah seemed genuinely excited about visiting me in such a beautiful city, but I could see the suspicion in Bella's eyes as she processed my carefully rehearsed explanations. At my farewell gathering 3 weeks later, she presented me with a handmade leather bookmark that featured our inside joke about terrible board game puns engraved in elegant script, asking me to promise that we would stay connected despite the distance and maintain the friendship that had meant so much to both of us over the past 2 years. I agreed in that moment, genuinely believing I could handle occasional contact once I had established my new life, not realizing this would be our final meaningful conversation for years to come. I threw myself into creating an entirely new identity in Portland with the same methodical precision I applied to water system designs, systematically replacing every aspect of my previous social existence with activities that had nothing to do with my Arizona memories. Within my first month, I joined 3 different rock climbing groups at local gyms, signed up for weekend glassblowing classes at a community arts center, and completely overhauled my social media presence to showcase Pacific Northwest adventures instead of desert landscapes and familiar Phoenix haunts that would only remind me of what I had left behind. My new position at EcoFlow Solutions challenged me with complex hydroelectric projects across Oregon and Washington, designing sustainable water management systems for small communities transitioning to renewable energy sources, giving me genuine fulfillment and professional growth that validated my decision to leave everything familiar. The work required site visits to remote locations throughout the Cascade Mountains and Columbia River Gorge, where I found myself genuinely excited about integrating my water systems expertise with cutting-edge renewable technology in ways that felt both innovative and environmentally meaningful. When Bella began texting about her latest dating disasters and workplace frustrations, expecting the same level of emotional investment I had always provided during our Phoenix conversations, I responded with increasingly brief and distant replies that offered generic encouragement without engaging in the detailed analysis she clearly wanted. The shift became most apparent when she called crying at midnight about being passed over for a promotion she felt she deserved, needing one of our old-style emotional support sessions where I would listen carefully and help her process every detail of the workplace politics involved. Instead, I responded with only a short text message offering general encouragement about her talents and suggesting she might want to discuss the situation with someone who could provide better perspective, then turned off my phone and went back to reviewing technical specifications for a tidal energy project that had captured my attention. My silence afterwards sent a clear message that I was no longer available as her emotional safety net, and I felt a surprising sense of relief rather than guilt about establishing these necessary boundaries. The contrast between my new life and my previous emotional patterns became starkly apparent during weekend climbing trips to Smith Rock and Mount Hood, where I found myself genuinely present in conversations with new friends who knew nothing about my romantic history and valued me for my engineering insights and dry sense of humor rather than my willingness to provide unlimited emotional labor. I started posting photos from these adventures with captions focused on technical challenges and environmental observations, deliberately curating an online presence that showcased someone who had moved forward completely rather than someone still processing old wounds or maintaining connections to previous chapters of his life. 3 months into my Portland life, I met Zara at the climbing gym where her confident approach to a challenging overhang route caught my attention before her genuine curiosity about my work ever came up in conversation. Unlike the careful emotional navigation I had grown accustomed to with previous relationships, Our connection built naturally around shared environmental passions and weekend adventures exploring Oregon's dramatic coastline and mountain wilderness areas rather than lengthy processing sessions about feelings and relationship dynamics. She worked as a renewable energy consultant for small municipalities across the Pacific Northwest, helping towns transition to sustainable power sources, and when I mentioned my hydroelectric projects at EcoFlow Solutions, her eyes lit up with professional interest rather than polite tolerance. Our first real conversation lasted 3 hours at a coffee shop near the climbing gym, discussing everything from tidal energy potential along the Oregon coast to the engineering challenges of integrating old municipal water systems with new renewable energy infrastructure. And I realized this was the first time in years that someone appreciated my methodical problem-solving approach rather than viewing it as emotional unavailability. Zara had this refreshing way of contributing equally to our conversations, suggesting weekend trips to visit renewable energy installations along the Pacific coast and sharing her own professional challenges with the same analytical mindset I applied to engineering problems. When I mentioned my long-term dream of visiting all the major national parks to study how they balance environmental preservation with infrastructure needs, she pulled out her laptop and immediately started researching which parks offered the best combination of renewable energy education centers and outdoor adventure opportunities. Our relationship developed into something balanced and forward-looking, with both partners contributing ideas for adventures and genuinely supporting each other's professional goals rather than one person providing emotional labor while the other took without reciprocating. She appreciated my systematic approach to planning weekend trips, helping me research optimal hiking routes and camping permits while I handled the technical logistics of equipment and weather considerations, creating a partnership where our different strengths complemented each other naturally. Weekend trips to Crater Lake and the Columbia River Gorge became opportunities to combine our shared interests in environmental sustainability with genuine outdoor adventures, photographing renewable energy installations against spectacular natural backdrops that represented everything we both valued about Pacific Northwest living. The contrast between this relationship and my previous emotional patterns became especially clear when Zara expressed interest in my glassblowing classes, asking thoughtful questions about the artistic process, and even signing up for a couples workshop where we could learn together rather than expecting me to sacrifice my personal interests for her entertainment. I found myself genuinely excited about sharing experiences with someone who enhanced them rather than requiring constant emotional maintenance. And for the first time in my adult life, I understood what people meant when they talked about relationships that energized rather than depleted the people involved in them. My professional life flourished beyond anything I had imagined possible as I led increasingly complex projects, culminating in a groundbreaking tidal energy system design for a coastal community in Oregon that came in 3 weeks ahead of schedule and significantly under budget, earning me recognition as a rising star in sustainable infrastructure development throughout the Pacific Northwest renewable energy sector. The project involved integrating traditional water management systems with cutting-edge tidal generators, requiring the kind of innovative problem-solving that made me genuinely excited to tackle each new engineering challenge while working with a team that valued creative solutions over bureaucratic processes. Meanwhile, according to our mutual friend Marcus during our monthly video calls, Bella's life remained frustratingly stagnant with a series of failed relationships and career disappointments as she apparently struggled without the emotional support system she had taken for granted during our friendship years. Marcus mentioned that she constantly asked about my well-being during their conversations, wanting to know whether I seemed happy in Portland, if I ever mentioned missing Phoenix or our old friend group, and whether my new job was everything I had hoped it would be when I left Arizona so suddenly. Through careful observation of social media activity that I told myself was just casual curiosity, I discovered that Bella had been viewing every single story I posted about weekend coastal explorations with Zara, professional conferences in Seattle, and rock climbing adventures throughout the Cascade Mountains, while her own Instagram feed remained disappointingly static with the same Phoenix restaurant scenes and bitter complaints about Arizona's limited dating prospects. The contrast became particularly stark when I posted photos from a renewable energy summit in Seattle where I had been invited to present my tidal energy research to industry leaders, and within hours Bella posted a melancholy selfie from the same Phoenix sports bar she had been frequenting for years, captioned with another vague reference to disappointing evenings and unappreciative people who did not understand her worth. I found myself analyzing these patterns with the same systematic approach I applied to engineering problems, recognizing the clear correlation between my posts showcasing professional success and personal fulfillment and her increasingly desperate attempts to project happiness while obviously struggling with the consequences of choices she had made years earlier. Her Friday night posts became particularly predictable, always featuring the same group of friends at familiar Phoenix establishments with captions about living her best life that felt more like attempts to convince herself than genuine expressions of contentment, especially when contrasted with my authentic documentation of Pacific Northwest adventures and meaningful career achievements. The irony was not lost on me that someone who had once viewed my methodical approach to life as limiting was now apparently trapped in repetitive patterns while I had found genuine freedom and growth through the same systematic decision-making she had once dismissed as overly cautious and emotionally unavailable. 2.5 years after leaving Phoenix, Bella orchestrated what she claimed was a spontaneous business trip to Portland, appearing at my EcoFlow Solutions office during lunch break and claiming that a client meeting had brought her to town while hoping we could grab a casual lunch to catch up on old times. The receptionist called me from the lobby, and when I saw her standing there in professional attire that looked more expensive than anything she had worn during our friendship years, I felt absolutely nothing beyond mild curiosity about her motivations for this obviously planned encounter. I agreed to lunch at a nearby restaurant, partly out of politeness and partly because I was genuinely interested in observing how much we had both changed during our years of separation, approaching the situation with the same analytical mindset I applied to studying water flow patterns in unfamiliar systems. Throughout our meal, I kept the conversations strictly professional while frequently mentioning Zara and our recent adventures exploring Crater Lake's geological features, making abundantly clear that my life had moved forward completely and that I was genuinely happy with the choices I had made since leaving Arizona. Bella seemed to be fishing for signs of regret or loneliness, asking pointed questions about whether I missed the simplicity of Phoenix life and whether Portland's competitive professional environment had lived up to my expectations when I left everything familiar behind so suddenly. I responded with enthusiasm about my tidal energy projects, my growing expertise in renewable infrastructure, and my genuine excitement about the environmental impact of the work I was doing, while casually mentioning weekend climbing trips with Zara and our plans to visit Yellowstone's geothermal systems during our upcoming vacation together. Following this encounter, Bella began sending increasingly personal text messages filled with specific memories of our friendship and subtle hints about how much she valued our connection and whether I ever thought about the conversations we used to have during those late-night board game sessions at her apartment. When I responded only with brief, polite acknowledgments that treated her messages like casual updates from any distant acquaintance, she escalated to manufacturing emergency situations that required immediate emotional support from someone who understood her personality and communication style. The most obvious attempt came through a late-night text claiming her car had broken down on a remote highway outside Phoenix and that she needed someone familiar to talk her through the stress of being stranded alone in the desert darkness with unreliable cell service. Instead of the personal phone call she clearly expected, where she could recreate the emotional intimacy of our previous friendship dynamic, I immediately arranged for a local towing service through my roadside assistance app and sent a professional follow-up text with the service details, maintaining appropriate boundaries while ensuring she received actual help rather than just emotional validation. Her response revealed the manipulative nature of the situation when she seemed more frustrated by my practical solution than grateful for the efficient assistance, making it clear that the emergency had been designed to test whether I would drop everything to provide the kind of personal support I had once offered without question. On my birthday, exactly 3 years after leaving Phoenix, I received an elaborately crafted message from Bella that referenced specific shared memories from our friendship and suggested that our connection had been too special to just disappear forever. Timing this emotional appeal perfectly as Zara and I were spending the afternoon at a sustainable jewelry store examining engagement rings made from recycled metals and ethically sourced stones. The message arrived while I was holding a particularly beautiful ring featuring a stone we had collected during our first rock climbing adventure together, And I found the contrast between Bella's desperate attempt to reclaim emotional territory and my genuine excitement about building a future with someone who truly understood me to be almost absurdly perfect in its timing. When I posted an Instagram story of our hands over the jewelry display case with the caption about making sustainable choices for our future, Bella immediately began calling multiple times, which I declined while focusing entirely on the meaningful conversation Zara and I were having about commitment, shared values, and the kind of partnership we both wanted to create together. 6 weeks later, during a sunrise hot air balloon ride powered by renewable energy systems over the Columbia River Gorge, with wind turbines creating a spectacular backdrop against the golden hour light, I proposed to Zara with the ring featuring our special stone, and her enthusiastic acceptance came with tears of pure joy rather than the obligation or uncertainty that had characterized my previous romantic experiences. The moment felt perfect in every way that mattered, from the sustainable technology powering our flight to the genuine excitement in Zara's voice as she said yes while we floated above the renewable energy installations that represented everything we both valued about environmental stewardship and innovative engineering solutions. When we posted our engagement announcement featuring the ring photographed against the backdrop of wind turbines at golden hour, with a caption about building a future as sustainable as our love, the news quickly reached Phoenix through our mutual friend network, and I could almost predict Bella's reaction before it actually materialized through increasingly desperate attempts to contact me. She created fake social media accounts to monitor our engagement posts and celebration photos, while sending increasingly frantic messages through mutual friends asking for one real conversation as old friends who had meant something important to each other during a significant period of our lives. Marcus eventually called to tell me that Bella had been asking him to facilitate a phone call where she could offer proper congratulations and closure, but I politely declined through him, explaining that my engagement represented a new chapter that had no connection to previous relationships and that I preferred to keep my focus on building something beautiful with Zara rather than processing old emotions that belonged to a different version of myself.